The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. Chapter 1, Part 1. The unicorn lived in a lilac wood, and she lived all alone. She was very old, though she did not know it, and she was no longer the careless color of sea foam, but rather the color of snow falling on a moonlit night. But her eyes were still clear and unwearied, and she still moved like a shadow on the sea. She did not look anything like a horned horse, as unicorns are often pictured, being smaller and cloven-hoofed, and possessing only that oldest, wildest grace that horses have never had, that deer have only in a shy, thin imitation, and goats in dancing mockery. Her neck was long and slender, making her head seem smaller than it was, and the mane that fell almost to the middle of her back was as soft as dandelion fluff and as fine as cirrus. She had pointed ears and thin legs, with feathers of white hair at the ankles, and the long horn above her eyes shone and shivered with its own sea-shell light, even in the deepest midnight. She had killed dragons with it, and healed a king whose poisoned wound would not close, and knocked down ripe chestnuts for bear cubs. Unicorns are immortal. It is their nature to live alone in one place, usually a forest where there is a pool clear enough for them to see themselves, for they are a little vain, knowing themselves to be the most beautiful creatures in all the world, and magic besides. They mate very rarely, and no place is more enchanted than one where a unicorn has been born. The last time she had seen another unicorn, the young virgins who still came seeking her now and then had called to her in a different tongue. But then she had no idea of months and years and centuries, or even of seasons. It was always spring in her forest, because she lived there, and she wandered all day among the great beech trees, keeping watch over the animals that lived in the ground and under bushes, in nests and caves, forests and treetops. Generation after generation, wolves and rabbits alike, they hunted and loved and had children and died, and as the unicorn did none of these things, she never grew tired of watching them. One day it happened that two men with long bows rode through her forest hunting for deer. The unicorn followed them, moving so warily that not even the horses knew she was near. The sight of men filled her with an old, slow, strange mixture of tenderness and terror. She never let one see her if she could help it, but she liked to watch them ride by and hear them talking. "I mislike the feel of this forest," the elder of the two hunters grumbled. "Creatures that live in a unicorn's wood learn a little magic of their own in time, mainly concerned with disappearing, will find no game here." "Unicorns are long gone," said the second man, "if indeed they ever were. This is a forest, like any other." "Then why do the leaves never fall here, or the snow? I tell you, there is only one unicorn left in this world. Good luck to the lonely old thing, I say, and as long as it lives in this forest there won't be a hunter that takes so much as a titmouse home at his saddle. Ride on, you'll see. I know their ways, unicorns." "From books," answered the other, "only from books and tales and songs. Not in the reign of 3 kings has there even been a whisper of a unicorn seen in this country or any other. You know no more about unicorns than I do, for I've read the same books and heard the same stories, and I've never seen one either." The first hunter was silent for a time, and the second whistled sourly to himself. Then the first said, "My great-grandmother saw a unicorn once. She used to tell me about it when I was little." "Oh, indeed! And did she capture it with a golden bridle?" "No. She didn't have one. You don't need to have a golden bridle to catch a unicorn. That part's fairy tale. You only need to be pure of heart." "Yes, yes," the younger man chuckled. "Did she ride her unicorn then, bareback under the trees, like a nymph in the early days of the world?" My great-grandmother was afraid of large animals," said the first hunter. "She didn't ride it, but she sat very still, and the unicorn put its head in her lap and fell asleep. My great-grandmother never moved till it woke." "What did it look like?" "Pliny describes the unicorn as being very ferocious, similar in the rest of its body to a horse, but with the head of a deer, the feet of an elephant, the tail of a bear, a deep bellowing voice, and a single black horn, 2 cubits in length. And the Chinese My great-grandmother said that only that the unicorn had a good smell. She could never abide the smell of any beast, even a cat or a cow, let alone a wild thing, but she loved the smell of the unicorn. She began to cry once, telling me about it. Of course she was a very old woman then, and cried at anything that reminded her of her youth. "Let's turn around and hunt somewhere else," the second hunter said abruptly. The unicorn stepped softly into a thicket as they turned their horses and took up the trail only when they were well ahead of her once more. The men rode in silence until they were nearing the edge of the forest, when the second hunter asked quietly, "Why did they go away, do you think? If there ever were such things. Who knows? Times change. Would you call this age a good one for unicorns?" "No. But I wonder if any man before us had ever thought his time was a good time for unicorns. And it seems to me now that I have heard stories, but I was sleepy with wine, or I was thinking of something else. Well, no matter. There's enough light yet to hunt, and if we hurry. Come." They broke out of the woods, kicked their horses to a gallop, and dashed away. But before they were out of sight, the first hunter looked back over his shoulder and called, just as though he could see the unicorn standing in the shadow, "Stay where you are, poor beast. This is no world for you. Stay in your forest, and keep your trees green and your friends long lived. Pay no mind to young girls, for they never become anything more than silly old women. And good luck to you." The unicorn stood at the edge of the forest and said aloud, "I am the only unicorn there is." They were the first words she had spoken, even to herself, in more than 100 years. That can't be, she thought. She had never minded being alone, never seeing another unicorn, because she had always known that there were others like her in the world, and a unicorn needs no more than that for company. But I would know if all the others were gone. I'd be gone too. Nothing can happen to them that does not happen to me. Her own voice frightened her and made her want to be running. She moved along the dark paths of her forest, swift and shining, passing through sudden clearings unbearably brilliant with grass or soft with shadow, aware of everything around her, from weeds that brushed her ankles to insect-quick flickers of blue and silver, as the wind lifted the leaves. "Oh, I can never leave this. I can never, cannot. Not if I were the only unicorn in the world. I know how to live here. I know how everything smells and tastes and is. Where could I ever search for in the world, except this again?" But when she stopped running at last, and stood still, listening to crows and a quarrel of squirrels over her head, she wondered, but suppose they are hiding together, somewhere far away? What if they are hiding and waiting for me? From that first moment of doubt, there was no peace for her. From the time she first imagined leaving her forest, she could not stand in one place without wanting to be somewhere else. She trotted up and down beside her pool, restless and unhappy. Unicorns are not meant to make choices. She said no, and yes, and no again. Day and night, and for the first time she began to feel the minutes crawling over her like worms. "I will not go. Because men have seen no unicorns for a while, does not mean they have all vanished. Even if it were true, I would not go. I live here." But at last she woke up in the middle of one warm night and said, "Yes, but now." She hurried through her forest, trying to look at nothing and smell nothing, trying not to feel her earth under her cloven hoofs. The animals who move in the dark, the owls and the foxes and the deer, raised their heads as she passed by, but she would not look at them. "I must go quickly," she thought, "and come back as soon as I can. Maybe I won't have to go very far, but whether I can find the others or not, I will come back very soon, as soon as I can." Under the moon, the road that ran from the edge of her forest gleamed like water, but when she stepped onto it, away from the trees, she felt how hard it was, and how long. She almost turned back then, but instead she took a deep breath of the woods air that still drifted to her, and held it in her mouth like a flower as long as she could. End Chapter 1, Part 1. The Last Unicorn belongs to Peter S. Beagle. I just read it. Thanks for listening.